All right. Well, in terms of to go back to someone who's much less of a mensch, Joe Biden. I think we have a clip of Biden talking about Venezuela and Florida.
God, yeah.
We also need to rebuild our ability to work with our partners throughout the Western Hemisphere to realize the enormous potential of this region and the world, to confront those leaders who continue to oppress the rights of their people. We should be leading the international effort to confront the massive humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Maduro, who I've met, is a dictator, plain and simple. And he's causing incredible suffering among the Venezuelan people to maintain his grip on power. The Venezuelan people need our support to recover their democracy and rebuild their country. That's why I would immediately grant temporary protective status to Venezuelans as president, so the Republicans in the Senate can't keep blocking it like they did again just last week. And I'll make sure we're supporting neighboring countries that are being overrun with immigration because of Maduro, like Colombia, which are caring for millions of Venezuelans who fled their country in desperation. I'll use sanctions as one of the tools for a comprehensive strategy that includes humanitarian assistance, international pressure, and support for democratic actors in Venezuela to force the regime to embark on the road to a free and fair election. We also need a new Cuba policy. The administration's approach is not working. Cuba is no closer to freedom and democracy than it was 4 years ago. The fact there's more political prisoners, the secret police are as brutal as ever, and Russia is once again a major presence in Cuba and Havana.
Not Russia. You know what's really annoying about everything he just said is the U.S. is like best friends with Colombia, which is a right-wing narco government that is literally participating in the murder of activists, like social activists.
Yeah, like one of the highest
people.
murder rates for labor organizers.
Yeah,
right?
like in the last year, like over like hundreds have been killed with the complicity of the government. And Honduras is literally a narco state. That's what people are fleeing Honduras. Like, it's just people are fleeing Venezuela because of your sanctions. You destroyed their economy. Like, they're going to Colombia because they need work.
Yeah, and if you're going to say like, oh, it's not really the the sanctions, it's really this or that that the Maduro government has done, then hey, let's at least lift the sanctions so we can test that.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's find out. Let's find out if it's the government or your sanctions. Also, the word dictatorship, like I think. There are a lot of adversary countries that are dictatorships. I do not believe that Venezuela is one of them. I think it's the most outrageous claim.
Yeah.
Constantly say the brutal Maduro dictatorship.
Well, Bernie Sanders actually took some
tyrant. He said a tyrant, brutal tyrant.
He called Chavez a brutal tyrant.
No, he called Maduro.
So he did do that. Although he also took some heat in the early stages of the primary because he wouldn't say dictator.
Right. Right. That's tyrant.
That's the word that you have to be willing to say. What was the quote that you pulled up for us?
Right, so the quote that I pulled up is from Blinken's Blinken Senate hearing, and
is that you, Katie?
And during it, he says that while Biden would seek to more effectively target sanctions on the country, which aim to oust President Maduro, who retains control of the country. He said the new administration would look at more humanitarian assistance. And then on top of that, during that is when he said that Biden will recognize Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Guaido, I don't know if anyone's from New York City, but like watching this, but Guaido looks so much like a Catholic school kid who wears a big backpack running for the bus. It's just, this is not anti-Catholic, but it is like, Dan, you're from New York City, right? It's, what I'm talking about? The guy's wearing the Navy blazers.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. The big backpack, because he has to have the Bible and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, he looks like a douchey frat boy who's like always on cocaine. Like that dude's always high. If you look at zoom into his pupils. That guy is always coked up. He always looks like he's been snorting coke, like all the time.
He can just go across the border to where the people are fleeing, right?
Just go to Colombia and get some cocaine.
And it is also amazing that after months of this big issue about it being terrible, and it was bad, that the Republicans wouldn't recognize Biden's victory in the election.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get the guy who lost the election to somehow be able to keep power. Guaido, didn't even run for president. He's like, there's no basis of there's nobody voted for him for this office. The assembly did, but they're not actually constitutionally empowered to do that.
Not a single Venezuelan cast a vote for Guaido for president.
Yeah,
that's an accurate statement.
Yeah, right. And but you're still saying no. We get to decide that that this and whatever criticisms you have, and I agree dictatorship would be going way too far. But whatever criticisms you have of insufficient democracy in Venezuela, what would be even less democratic?
I don't think the U.S.
Venezuelan voted for president.
Right. I don't think the U.S. gets to make the criticism. It's so absurd to me that any U.S. official thinks that they have the moral high ground to decide what is and isn't a democracy when look at their freaking allies.
But I think that's Ben's point, which is even by the own ridiculous police of the world, which we don't buy into, but even with that as your being your moral basis, which again everyone on the show rejects, even that is just so incoherent when you are trying to elevate someone who was not democratically elected. Just pick a narrative.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like if they had brought Paul Ryan back or somebody to run the House, and then suddenly the U.S. was like, "That's our president now." Nobody really voted for him, but he's in charge of the House, so that's the guy.
That actually is a good equivalent. Or it's kind of like that time that Pete Buttigieg declared himself the winner.
Oh my God! Yeah, but at least he actually ran and did get some votes. Not a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. Pete Buttigieg did almost. Right. Iowa, so it is slightly less ridiculous, but it is also actually my favorite thing about the Guaido thing is that I don't know how brutal a tyrant Maduro could be, because Guaido spent months going around to military bases saying, "Follow me, I'm the real president."
Right, and there were a lot of protests there. I thought, how did he
walk around doing that? Imagine what would happen.
In America, that guy would be in a prison cell.
Yeah,
could you imagine if someone in the U.S. was running around trying to literally incite a coup from members of the military? What would happen to them in America? And this guy was just walking around totally freely. But the thing is, you got to think behind closed doors. The Biden people have got to be man, how do we get out of this Guaido thing? This guy is pathetic. I know obviously they want a puppet, but they can't possibly like him for real.
Well,
he's so bad at it.
The Trump administration was doing that. The Trump administration was doing that. The Trump administration was pretty much behind closed doors saying, "How do we get out of Guaido?" That's when the Trump Beto O'Rourke comment came out. Was because Trump was trying to reverse that and find pretty much anybody else to be his puppet Venezuelan leader.
This guy's pathetic. And he's also openly corrupt. He doesn't even pretend not to be. He's just trying to steal money from the Venezuelan oil company that the US basically took the assets, stole the assets of. Him and his whole crew are just making millions. Well, they don't even do what they're it's just pathetic as a puppet. Worst puppets in history.
Fair enough. So before we wrap up, I think that talked about Venezuela, where in some sense it seems like Biden's actually amping up the attempts to undermine Maduro and impose Guaido.
Maybe he'll find a trans woman in Venezuela to be. That would be the right person to do it. that could be the self-declared president, and then we can all get behind it because it'll be super woke.
Anybody that says no to the coup is transphobic now.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh my God, I can imagine that. But then, the other thing.
And by the way, another term I patented is woke washing, which is when you use identity politics to kind of launder the fact that you actually have an evil person in power.
I think I edited the woke washing clip.
There you go. Yeah. With Brianna Joy Gray and Rania Khalek right here.
Yeah, that was one of the first clips I edited for you.
There you go. Yeah. Thanks, Faris, for your editing. International mystery man of the editing left. Yeah.
I didn't even know that you were the man behind that. Well done.
Edit, yeah.
Nice. But what about China? So it seems so that's another thing where it's a little unclear that Biden even really wants to go back to the pre-Trump status quo, at least to me.
Oh, he doesn't. His team, I mean, they're like the China hawks. I mean, that's just the trajectory of U.S. foreign policy. It's almost like it doesn't matter who's in charge. And I think that the Biden administration will probably be more effective. I do think there is like a certain contingency of people who seem to think that Biden's going to be close to China. I don't think that's true at all.
Oh, like the Trump. Yeah. The Trump.
Yeah. Like the Trump people were like, Biden's good. That's not even a little bit true. And also, before they left, Mike Pompeo declared the China's treatment of Uyghurs to be genocide. And whatever you think about that, that's a huge like escalation rhetorically in like the diplomatic realm for the US to do that. Like China and the US are totally on this really, I don't know if it'll continue under Biden, the level of diplomatic hawkishness, but something that we've seen from China for the first time since I can remember is even their diplomats are kind of like trolling the US. Chinese diplomats didn't used to do that. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. Chinese diplomats used to be very like reserved and, calm. And now they're just like totally like trolling the US online with their Twitter accounts. It's kind of unprecedented and a little bit funny.
Yeah. Which doesn't mean, again, it's like you can have a criticism of China's treatment of Uyghurs, but that doesn't mean that like it's ever a good thing for the United States to be ratcheting up any kind of like belligerent discourse with any country, including China. And of course, it's obviously super hypocritical.
I also think it's very important. I also think it's very important, though, to like that because everybody wants to say like obviously China's not a perfect country. No question. They have human rights issues. They're not exactly like they don't have the same political freedoms that we have in the US. I don't really care so much because that's China's issue, but we do also have to. It's like we have to interrogate where certain information is coming from.
Yeah, well, it's a disproportionate focus.
Something shady is going on with the way China is treating Uyghurs. However, some of the more extreme claims, like organ harvesting and like things that there literally is no evidence for, except for like this one guy in Germany who's like a right-wing Christian fundamentalist and has also said anti-Semitic things.
Yeah,
there's this guy, Adrian, like we also like shouldn't be scared to point out where the State Department is getting its claims from. And I think there is a fear on the left of doing that because the left has been so beaten down over the decades for like being an apologist for this or that dictator or like not taking human rights violations seriously enough. The left is scared of being called genocide and dictator apologists. Well, I'm not saying to deny or apologize.
Well, honestly, if we're being honest, I just want to say something for myself. Like, I actually feel it's a bit the opposite. Like, I feel like I can't have, and I get it. I think that like, I'm just going to be honest. Sometimes, like, I do feel like nuance can be a bit of a privilege. Like, it depends who we're talking to. Yeah. But I would say that, like, yes, do I think that the media very much vilifies certain countries and regimes? And do I think that's dangerous because they're doing that to, like, massage the public into being war ready? I do. I also don't, like, I think among friends on the left, I get frustrated in the opposite direction, where I get where it's coming from, but it's like, we can acknowledge that there are bad things that happen in countries, and that doesn't mean that we should have regime change. And it also doesn't mean that people in the media, and this is the biggest part, I think, people in the media who are highlighting that, like Jake Tapper or whatever, are total hypocrites. They have no universal standards, and everything they're doing is in the service of the State Department.
Yeah.
Well, like, it's like, when I think of, like, remember, the Kuwait, like the Iraq, Kuwait,
right? The lies about the
being thrown in incubator.
I was thinking about that earlier, right? Which is a good example because Saddam Hussein really was this.
He was a monster,
extremely repressive, monstrous dictator. Killed tons of Kurds and Iraqi communists.
He was also our friend. He was also our friend.
Yeah.
Right.
But also the incubator thing was obviously bullshit. And so
we killed many more people because of what we did there.
And because of that lie was used as like a justification and a basis, and that's why I feel it isn't like we shouldn't necessarily shy away.
Right, but I guess I think we could be honest about it. Like I totally get it, but like I think we can be honest about what's going on in another country, and also I agree. Like because
I agree. I guess I see the other side of it, and maybe this is me also having like this is me also like reacting to like covering Syria.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Syria stuff makes me want to make a. Okay, I'm ready. Everyone's gonna cancel me. No, but like the Syria stuff is so one-sided that all it like that. If you want any honest discussion about Syria, then you need to actually engage in what the point of talking about Syria is, because nobody will ever do that. And it's a lot like the Iraq argument, right? And like the media does not allow for any space of any discussion where you can acknowledge the bad things that are done in certain countries. Because if you're doing that, all you're doing is putting more weight on one side, which is, again, a pro-war narrative.
Well, but I think it is also important, like, obviously there's a balance. You don't want to fall for the equivalent of the incubators thing. They're like, false or misleading propaganda is super common in these contexts. But also it like going the other way and sort of being a conspiracy theorist about every piece of information about, some terrible thing that some regime that happens to have come into conflict with American empire is doing is not helpful. It's not politically helpful because it doesn't make you a more effective.
I don't see that being the problem on the left, though. Like I see the opposite. Like I wish that was the problem. Like if that would be easier to deal with, actually.
Well, and I also think what happens is there's like an overcompensation in the service of time. I'm not even kidding. Like in this service of time and space, where it's like everything is so in one direction, that. Like, what is the value of even every word that we put into an article? Like, I think I'm saying something that obviously is going to get me in trouble, but like, I think we shouldn't underestimate how coordinated and unfounded so many things are that are said by the quote unquote mainstream media, and how things are called conspiracy theories that turn out to be actually just theories that are not theories. They are like descriptions of things. And so, we do have to like, and I do, there's the Chomsky position, right? Which is like, well, let's focus on the stuff that our own government is doing that's bad. Like we can condemn other governments. But I do think that like the left does spend a lot of time. And I also think like, if we wanted to have a more nuanced conversation, that would require the media actually doing anything but like reciting talking points from, which it really does.
Capitalist media, we can't have capitalist controlled media. And we'll never get good coverage under capitalist control media. And that's
I actually had that was one of the first articles that I wrote for Jacobin. It was called "Free Press is Too Important to Trust Capitalists With," which as I remember Michael Brooks pointing out at the time is a terrible headline. It should have been, "Free Press is too important to trust the free market." That's just such an obvious, better word. But yeah.
Sure. Let me very briefly plug a book by Sam Leibovitz called Free Speech and Unfree News. And it shows how in the 30s and 40s, the idea that a free news was a news free of government control and why that took hold in the United States. And it opens up new space for thinking of new models about what a post-capitalist press might look like. So just want to highlight that.